So first on the agenda, we have Matthew Pragel, and he is going to discuss his team. He's working, I believe, with two other math faculty, and he will be discussing his questions and assignment bank that he and his team have developed. Second on the agenda, we have Wendy Bratina, and she is going to discuss a manual that she developed for her practicum, and it's a manual for both students and faculty. And last but not least, we have Christina Nowik, and she is going to discuss text adaptation, or adoption, I should say, and the process that she and her team of ESL faculty went through producing supplemental materials for OER. So Matthew, I will let you take it away.
Thank you, everyone. It's nice to see everyone again. My name is Matthew Pragel. I am a math faculty. I teach a mixture of classes, usually a bit of college level classes recently, but I've taught lots of developmental and college level classes. And I'm here today to talk about how we're using OER in our math courses. So, one of the big things with our math classes is, being a large discipline, we have lots of resources out there. So I listed a few here. The two we primarily are using if we have ebooks are either OpenStax or LibreText, but there are a lot of resources, at least for us in, a large discipline. That's one of the advantages for us. However, I would say, the textbook is only part of the equation for us, if you will, right? A lot of us have been using online components to our courses, like Pearson's My Math Lab, ALEX, these other resources for many, many years. And that's sort of been the deal breaker for us is, without these online components, a lot of our faculty just, won't even consider OER resources there. So that's where our goal for our project. I've been working on this OER project with Jason Rosenberry and Todd Stein. Our goal was to develop some of these resources, get some of these resources a little bit more curated for math courses, so that hopefully more members of our department will be willing to adopt them. So again, here's kind of just the types of things that we're using previously in Pearson and ALEX. These questions that give students lots and lots of practice with them. But that's kind of a critical component. A lot of faculty won't even consider a textbook unless it has these resources. So what we've primarily been looking at is these two programs, WeRisk Quizzes, which is a tool that embeds into Brightspace. And then more recently, we've switched everything to MyOpenMath, which I would say is kind of the big use for OER in math courses that gives us that algebraic, gives us that tool, where we can be able to come up with these algorithmic questions and really give our students that online component. So that's really what we focused on with this project, was being able to develop these resources and really being able to create these extra tools to go with our courses. So here's just a quick example of the type of thing that you can do in these types of algorithmic questions. This is a MyOpenMath question that I have for college algebra, being able to solve. This is a polynomial inequality, being able to use the math tools. I should have probably used a little bit more notation in the bottom, but very, very user-friendly, easy to read. It works well with screen readers. Definitely that's one of the reasons why we've been primarily looking at MyOpenMath, is that it has all this accessibility and all this functionality that we've want. So our goal of our project was to be able to compile resources for some of our larger enrollment courses. Math 103 was the one that Jason worked on with Todd, and that one is done. I'm in the process of working on basically the MyOpenMath course for our Applied Calculus for Business, Math 110, but certainly others have looked at some other courses and are working on those as well. So being able to come up these algorithmic questions, you can see you can practice similar questions there. That's really what we've been using for online math classes for a while. And that's really kind of the crutch to being able to switch over to OER for our courses. So here's a quick quick question is, how do I get these questions and what do I use? I did a quick search for exponential equations. So in college algebra, we're solving exponential equations, things with exponents in the power. And you can see here, there's 1,200 existing questions there. Now, I need to be a little bit careful with that. It's very easy to modify questions in MyOpenMath. So a lot of these are kind of variations of the same question, but the nice feature is, looking for something, it's pretty much there. The downside is going through 1,200 different questions to see, is this the phrasing I use in my course? Is it the appropriate content for this particular class? That's where it's been taking a little bit more time, and that's really where the time spent on this project has been, to be able to go in and say, this question is appropriate for this course, this is what we want for this. And we've been putting together, curating these assignments, but lots of things available that are existing right there. And then the other benefit and the other thing we've been working on is, well, if it's not there already, there is a way to create questions. There is a way to use the program and develop your own questions, specifically for the tool that you're looking for, specifically for, the phrasing that you want. It's a little bit scary. So here's kind of the coding to it. It feels a little bit more computer sciencey to me when you're actually developing it. But it gives you that flexibility to go and really, narrow down to what you want. And, if you can't see it from what's existing, you can develop it yourself. So, the other kind of portion of time I would say that we've spent for this project, not just looking through existing questions, but being able to develop ones on our own or modify existing ones so that they're really addressing, what we see fit there. And so here is the end result of that previous question, right? Here is the ugly sort of coding aspect, but here's what the students see. And, there's some kind of nice features here. The name that's being used will change with the problem, trying to, incorporate more diverse names, has been a piece there that's helpful for questions. So being cognizant of, not just using Matthew, Dan, Todd in our examples and opening that up a little bit more. But again, very easy for students to use. Very easy for students to see. So being able to develop these existing assignments so that when another faculty says, hey, I'd like to try OER, I've heard good things about it, we can pass off the entire course and say, well, here's an existing assignment. You can edit it. You can, take what you want from there, but here's a starting point for you. So you can, take with that and go from where you will with it. And, really giving other faculty that existing framework, I think, is essential to getting them to adopt these resources, because there is a little bit of a learning curve. So again, thankfully, we were approved for one of the OER grants to start this foundation. And, now I feel much more comfortable developing this for all of our courses that, I'm able to use OER with in the future. So here's, just a quick peek of what courses we have faculty using OER with right now. And these are the books that, again, have existed for a while, but really the sticking point was having that online component, that way for students to practice, on their own and go through it and work in math and being able to practice that. So, that's really been the key piece to what we've been able to do. So we have, I would say, about 4 courses that are consistently using OER. Every time now we're looking at new textbooks. Again, that's been a focus in the department to see, is there an OER option? We understand not everyone is going to love OER, not everyone is necessarily going to go with this, but trying to make it as easy as possible so you can see from there. I can show real quick my course that I have. Here's a Math 103 course, and this is basically what I've kind of developed from there, is just all of my different assignments that I have in the course that I now have existing, and it's very easy to share this framework with other faculty who want a starting point to use. Jason also developed a really nice one. If you wanted to teach primarily using MyOpenMath, you can kind of use that as your LMS instead of using Brightspace as well. So that's been a nice feature as well for that. The other thing I like about MyOpenMath is it embeds into Brightspace as well. So all of my assignments are one click away. I can say, this week work on homework module 5, and it's just a separate content page in D2L from there. So this will work well, I think, for really any sort of STEM type of course, engineering, science. There's lots of existing questions already. And then certainly, if something you're not able to find what you want, you can create what you need there. There is that learning curve, but it's definitely possible, and you can customize to exactly what you want for it. So then last, I just wanted to point out the math faculty who have used OER with this. So Jason, Todd, Catherine Frost in Gettysburg, Susan Cooper-Wynn in Lancaster. We've all been doing this, and really the goal is to kind of build that critical mass and try to get more buy-in from the department so that this can take a little bit more of a form there. Any questions for me? Well, thank you all.
Great. Thank you, Matthew. Okay, so up next, we have Wendy.
All right, thank you, Valerie, and thank you, Matthew, for leading us in. I'm going to talk about the OER that we developed for our fieldwork course, our Practicum. This is the final course in the semester, or in the program that our students take. And I'm going to discuss the need for it, a little bit about the timeline, how it debuted, and show you what it looks like. A bonus feature we figured out along the way, how we're going to assess this, and what I love about it. I have been with HACC for 10 years full-time as the program director, and I am really excited to share this with you. So this speaks to the why. We had a need for an alternative option. Most of our students were in their mid-30s and beyond. They were taking one of our 3-degree programs. We have a addiction and recovery services, a human services. Both of those are career programs. And then we have our transfer program, which is social services. Most of our students were part-time. It was taking them a while to get through, like many of the students at HACC. And as a requirement at the time of development of the OER, students to take the practicum were coming to a seminar, which is taught in a blended format. So they were either coming on campus or remote, and then alternate weeks online component. And then they were to be out at a human services agency and work about 18 to 20 hours per week if they were in the 14-week fall or spring semester. If they were in the summer semester, that number rose up a little bit higher to about 21 hours a week to get to 255 hours. This was an outside accreditation requirement of the 250 hours. Since then, we are not using that outside accreditation. And post-pandemic, we were able to change our hours for internship to 125 hours. So that in itself made a difference. However, most of the practicum experiences our students took and are taking were unpaid. We see that changing a little bit in some areas, being willing to pay them. So students were not only paying for 4 credits for the practicum, they were also paying a $25 fee for liability insurance. They were also paying approximately $50 to get their legal background clearances. And when they came out of our program, a lot of times, depending what they went into, it wasn't really paying them well as a field. So often those students had a lot of debt for years. What came to a head for us is we were seeing that students just weren't purchasing the texts that we were requiring at all. We were watching students take pictures with their cell phones of the assignments out of the book for the 1 or 2 people in the class that bought the book. We were seeing them ask if it could be on reserve in the library. They were questioning whether they had to get it, but overall, they just weren't buying the textbook. I went into a pretty in-depth timeline here because you all are considering doing your OER. So I went back through all of my email trails for the last couple years to look at what point did I do certain things. So I know this is a bit text heavy, but I tried to pick out the main features. And of course, the pandemic messed my goal up of how I was going to roll this out. So in February 2020, I expressed my interest in filling out the application from the OER committee that I thought I'd like to do this. I went to my department chair at the time, that was Melinda Aish, and asked her to do the letter of support, submitted my application, and within a couple weeks was notified that it was approved. And then the pandemic hit, and by fall, a lot of things were happening. So my role had changed. I was had moved into an associate dean role, and I was doing different things. So this kind of fell to the side. I came back to faculty. So in the fall, after all of that, I said, we still have to get this done. By the next year in 21, I went to a Creative Commons training. I started going to more of the workshops offered by HACC, by the committee. I worked with my discipline faculty to form an idea of what were all the items we needed to put in our content. And then in the next month, I did something outside of HACC. So Judith Dutil and Melissa Whaler were offering an OER sprint opportunity. And I went and did that. And that kind of got me really into giving myself some deadlines. By June, I had my table of contents put together. And then in 2022, that summer of 21 through the spring of 22 was when I wrote the content. A lot of this manual had different forms that we were in the process of updating. So we were at the same time doing those updates to put in the OER. And I began to go to different trainings on LibreText. I also worked extensively with the committee on lots of questions. Valerie Gray got lots of emails from me, as did Karen Woodring. And by May, I was able to send what I had to the discipline for a final review. They had some ideas of changes, and I made those changes. Going forward then, this is where everything kind of sped up the process. By June of 2022, I had it ready to go. I sent the document to LibreText, and they put it in what's called a sandbox area. So it's an area that you can still work on it and get everything adjusted, and it's not published to the public yet. Over the next few weeks, I started adding graphics, adjusting layout, made sure everything was how I wanted, and then you do a request for an instructor account. I made that request by the end of June. They published the manual by July 5th. I was super excited. And by August, I received my stipend, because once it's published, then you can put in for the stipend, depending on what type of OER you are making. That fall, then, we added it to our Form 335 so that we could start using the OER in the spring of 23. So this is our first semester using it. We have 2 sections of the practicum running, and we have totally gotten done with our published textbook. We are only using this going forward. The debut, it's here. So I want to go ahead and show you the actual manual. And let's see. It's telling me it's paused, but it's not wanting to unpause for me. So let me go ahead and show you this. All right, so this is the manual. Basically, there's some front matter there, which is, if you've looked at any OERs out there, it's kind of your acknowledgements and your title and your table of contents. We have an introduction, what is practicum, and preparing. Some things during the practicum. We have assignments out there, weekly reports, and then this is where all the main content is located in the learning topics. We have some resources, forms to be used, the references page, and then the back matter. So these type of things, what we learned was that students were excited at the idea of not having to buy a textbook. And what we as a discipline were excited about were that we would have the ability to make changes going. I just wanted to do the applause again. Okay, so what's the bonus feature? The bonus feature is those first chapters that you saw, we realized in the former iteration, which was a Practicum manual, it was a PDF, it was up on our website, we shared it with our students. Part of that had frequently asked questions to prepare students on how to discuss some of those questions with the agencies as they were trying to find their site. How many hours will I work? Do I have to have liability insurance? Am I allowed to drive clients in my own car? What hours do I need? How much supervision time? So we had built that in a program manual. And what we realized is that chapters 1 through 4 of that OER was going to answer many of those questions. So now on our site, our program page site, we have a directive to the students that says, please review chapters 1 through 4 in the manual. Chapter 3 is most useful for students looking for a practicum site. They are directed to this at the time where they're doing what's called an intent to enroll. So the semester prior to practicum, they're letting us know that they're coming into practicum. So we have the number of sections offered that we need to, and also so that we can begin setting up contracts and learning plans and that type of thing. So at the time they're going to our page to get that intent to enroll survey up, taken care of, we're also telling them how to prepare. So it saves us a whole lot of conversations. All right, assessment. So we want to know how this is going. So we have 2 main forms that we are going to assess our OER. First, we're going to discuss with the faculty using it. Like I said, there are 2 sections this semester about the efficacy of it. So what were we saying as we put it into real use about how was it helpful for us as faculty to teach that content? And then we want the students to tell us, and we're going to use smart evals. Now, we had already planned on questions to use a survey with our students within the class. But when the OER committee came out with OER questions that they were going to do with smart evals, we took the questions that we had developed that differed from them and added it into the smart evals. So that's just going to save our students from getting 2 separate assessments. So the OER 7 questions are here on the left column, and in the right, we wanted to know what was the most helpful information, what additional information would you like to have seen? And then this question, what percentage of the manual did you read this semester? I believe there are ways you can get those statistics from LibreText, but I have to figure that out yet. So at least we wanted to get an idea from their perspective. How much did they actually use it? Are they using this form since they weren't using the textbook? And then finally, what do I love about OER? First of all, no additional cost for my students. That was the driving force. Never again, never, ever, ever do I have to go to a new edition because I control the updates. I can adapt my course, and I'm not matching it to a text. I'm adapting my course to learning outcomes, and then the text serves, or the OER serves, as a support. I have continuous support from OER faculty. I cannot say enough for how helpful they've been with any questions. It could be anything from, images and how am I uploading them, to do I need to use a certain font when I upload to LibreText? Like, I asked a bazillion questions and they were always super supportive. And then just the idea of sharing my work with the faculty community worldwide. So again, I'd like to kind of see the statistics on this to find out what people are viewing this that might go beyond my students. So thank you very much. I'm open to questions now, or if we're holding them till the end, that's fine too.
All right, thank you very much, Wendy. Okay, and we have next Christine. And Christine, you're muted.
How about now?
Very good.
This little Bluetooth headphone set likes to take a nap if I sit here too long. So thank you, colleagues, Matthew, Wendy, appreciate your presentation. I wanted to jump over really quickly here to our campus bookshelf and just pull up on LibreText's the HACC page, and this is LibreText Humanities. And so I'm here to talk about ESL, but we've got lots of other textbooks available here in the Humanities bookshelf, and I'm really proud of the work that faculty in English have done to advance the OER effort here at HACC. I do not have a PowerPoint to share with you, but I do want to talk through a couple of points for us. The idea, first of all, related to ESL, as you may or may not know, we have 2 full-time faculty who anchor the ESL program, and that's it. And so it's gratifying to know that OER support is available for adjunct faculty too. This was a collaboration between full-time faculty and adjunct faculty, and so they were monetarily supported through that process of adopting an OER. And for us, that process meant vetting a variety of sources and then landing on a source textbook that the group thought would be appropriate for ESL at different levels and within different domains, right? So you probably remember that we've got ESL speaking and listening, ESL reading and writing, and we have adopted texts for use in ESL. And this is a pretty big shift for us. Historically, the ESL textbooks have been very, very pricey. And so that was the genesis of this conversation for ESL, was moving to something that would be more accessible for students. One of the things that came out of our OER effort is an understanding of the process of adoption, right? And my thinking about the adoption process was to get us through it so that then we could just use that as a model for future adoption with or without the support of the OER funding, because once you go through it once and you see how this process works, we can then just use that process in other parts of the curriculum in ESL. And as we moved along, one of the things we learned was the level of flexibility that we could employ here, right? In terms of developing, as you heard our colleagues share, additional supplemental materials that would then be available to everyone in the discipline for their own use, that they could pull on those materials as they needed to. One of my greatest points of learning in this process was something that Wendy shared in her presentation. She said that she uses her OER as an enhancement to the course outcomes, not as sort of a march through the course outcomes. And that is also my approach as an instructor, but not everyone does that. In a lot of cases, the textbook becomes sort of this lockstep movement through the curriculum. And that was very new to me. I first dropped my textbook in 2005 when I was at another institution for reasons I'm happy to share outside of this meeting. But there was a particularly frustrating moment to me as I looked at how certain materials were presented in the text. Not everything is a pro-con argument, let me just say. And so in my teaching of composition, that was the moment for me where I thought, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm going to curate my own materials. And so I've been doing it that way for a very long time. But in teaching them other disciplines, I see this sort of lockstep movement through the text, which was illuminating for me just in terms of how people conceptualize learning outcomes and the achievement of those learning outcomes. And that was one of the things we talked through in ESL, is how can we provide more flexibility for people who might be accustomed to that lockstep movement, but also the people who aren't, right? The people who prefer to use the text as an enhancement instead of a map through a course. So developing available and accessible supplemental materials for faculty was important for us. Another thing that is important and has been a huge benefit, in addition to the low cost for students, is the immediate availability. We've got lots of students who come sort of at the last minute in some cases. And in some cases, it's just because their admissions process is complicated, right? Because maybe they're international students, or maybe they have lots of other bureaucracy that they need to manage before they can even step foot into a class. And perhaps they did not have enough lead time to grab that text before this class begins. But having the OER makes it immediately available in Brightspace, and that has been a huge benefit. In terms of flexibility, I want to talk about the importance of partnership with the bookstore too, and you're probably aware of my biases in this regard. But the fact of the matter is we have been able to walk a great line between OER digital materials and OER print materials. And I'll give you an example. We have an instructor in our department who uses a course pack, right? Like me, curated materials, all their stuff is available from a variety of sources, but they wanted the option of print, right? They wanted students to be able to print those things and have them accessible in the bookstore, right? Because we're talking about like a good number of pages here. So how can I have that material available in the bookstore for students? And I said, well, we can very easily put these course packs together, have them printed at the time by GANCOM, now through our newer system, and students can just pick them as they order their textbooks, right? The instructor said, great, how can I make sure that it's not just a stack of papers with holes punched in them that then require students to figure out, you know, the binder and this and that. And so I called the bookstore and said, can we sell this as a bundle? The binder and the materials together that students can just snag as part of their bookstore order? Yes. So this gives instructors the flexibility to offer both a print copy of an OER and a digital copy. So for students who prefer the digital copy, great. For students who prefer the paper copy, and especially in ESL, we've got lots of students who fall into that camp, right? Especially for our ESL OER, it's got exercises built into it, right? That are much easier to navigate on paper. And for language learning, that paper reinforcement often helps augment the learning. So engaging that flexibility with the bookstore has been a huge benefit for us as well. And I do recommend for us a strategic approach as we are navigating OER and print copies with the bookstore, because cranking out a whole OER on our printers in our campus-based locations might not be sustainable, but offering them as an opportunity for students to purchase in the bookstore for a very low fee, by the way, it's just the cost of printing, $5, $6, $7 with the binder, is a great way to meet students where they are if they want a paper copy. The other thing I wanted to mention about that particular thing is the idea that it's probably best for us to be thinking about an annual commitment on those materials. It's hard to predict from semester to semester who's going to want a digital copy and who's going to want a print copy. And so the bookstore will be reticent to print a high number of copies unless we say, you know what, we're going to use this for the whole year. So that way we're not going to have papers that go to waste. The binder's not an issue, but those thick packets, we don't want to end up trashing them or recycling them and eating the cost on that. So overall, let me say that OER as a process has been exceptional for our department. I think we may still lead the way in the number of OER adoptions. At one point, we were accounting for more than 30% of the OER development and adoptions here at HACC. And I think in part it's because for us, it's not quite as challenging to find texts that can work or to build texts just because of the nature of our fields. But I think it has really helped us see the flexibility of materials, right? It's moved us away from the idea that our texts have to be from a publisher. They have to be ordered through one channel. So I appreciate the work that our colleagues have done to advance OER. We are also the only major at HACC that has a no-cost option through the major. Right now, we have one course in the major that is not necessarily OER because the instructor who was doing OER has departed. But so I say now we're like a 90% cost-free major. So basically, if you take these sections of these courses, you can march through the English major without ever buying a text for the major. I'm not talking about general education, by the way. I know somebody's going to say, well, not for this class. No, for the major in English. So that's called, by the way, a Z major, zero cost text. And you might see that at other institutions. But that was an initiative that Doreen Fisher-Bammer and I talked about many years ago and brought to fruition for English. And that has been a great thing. So I will stop there, and I think we'll probably move over into questions and answers, Valerie, unless I am incorrect. But thank you all for coming today. It has been a delight to hear from everyone and to have the opportunity to chat with all of you.
Christine, there is a question in the chat from Karen, I believe.
Not a question, just a comment.
Okay.
So for faculty who don't anticipate many people printing, it doesn't help to have a bunch of copies in the bookstore. So like Christine said, if you know a certain percentage of your students or many of your students, and it makes sense to have the bookstore print it so that they can all purchase it, that is one opportunity. Many people using OER don't have many students print. So I teach English and I advise accounting and bookkeeping. I'd say maybe 2 to 3 people print in all the courses that I teach and or the people I advise. So for that situation, we do have a print on demand that we encourage faculty to forward to students. It is on the student page. I'm not saying it's very accessible on that page. So the best way to handle it is just to make sure that if you are using an OER, you're putting that information out for students.
Okay, so are there any questions or comments?
I have a question and comment. So I'm wondering about how much time it takes to do this, because I run the auctioneering program and we're looking at OER for auctioneering, and I am definitely not an auctioneering instructor. So I'm going to have to work with adjuncts who have the content expertise, and they all work full time. They're all busy. So I'm concerned about it needs to be done. It's going to have to be done. We just don't have a textbook. The old textbook was $145. It was and it was created by the old instructor, and it was going into her pocket and all that kind of stuff. So we're trying to use the content expertise from the auctioneering faculty to create this, but I'm going to have to guide it because I'm the full-time faculty member. So I'm just worried about how much time it took, or did it seem onerous at the time? Because I'm going to have to learn. It's not my area of expertise. So I'm going to have to be learning a little bit about and guiding adjuncts who are, not full-time teachers. They know the content, but they're, teaching them about how to develop a textbook is another issue as well. Maybe I'm overthinking it or something. Any comments?
Well, it takes a long time, I think, especially when you are not a content expert. And so just building that into the calendar and tempering our expectations, right? And you heard Wendy say she got a little derailed in the process because she had other things she had to attend to and was in literally a whole other position. And that happens a lot, right? So I would say I would devote probably at least a year
Okay.
in my mental timeline.
That's helpful, because I'm thinking we develop one textbook for all of the classes, because basically we're teaching to a test. They have to pass the licensing exam and that's all we're doing. And so it would be one textbook they would buy for all 5 classes. So that makes it a little easier. he's decided to have an adjunct do the auctioneering law chapter, an adjunct do the real estate chapter, an adjunct do the personal property chapter, and all things like that. So a year is a reasonable timeline. That might make it more palatable to the adjuncts too, that we don't have to do this tomorrow. So thank you.
Michelle, I put the link in the chat, but the way HACC has set up the projects, we have adopt, and we give faculty members $750 or $1,500 per course if there's 5 people working on it, like you were saying, and they get up to 9 months. The remix is when you are adding and changing with multiple sources. Less than 20% is your own content. For that, you get up to $1,300 per team member or up to $3,900 per course. And for that, we give you up to 15 months. And then for the create, where you're creating at least 20% of original content, that would be $2,500 per team member, maximum $7,500 per course, and an estimated completion time of up to 2 years. So when you have your team together, they could get a feel for how much of what is already out there and how much would need to be created. Or if something's ready to go for part of it, that could be an adoption, and then they could remix or create something else. But we do have the fee structure so that we're not asking people to take on something without paying them.
Right, and I appreciate that. Yeah, I have a meeting with my adjuncts on the 18th, and we're going to discuss whether they are willing to do this. And if they are, then I'll do the application and all that. I think it's due the 21st. But I got to get them on board. So that's helpful, because we're probably going to start from scratch. There isn't anything out there. I mean, there's not a lot. Now I've got a lot of expertise with my faculty, but anyway, I think Wendy had her hand up.
Well, Matthew, I think, was referring to something you were talking about in the chat. He said, are there professional organizations that can help recommend OER sources so you're not like...
So when you go on the PA Board of Auctioneer Examiners website, they do have a textbook, and it's that textbook that was written by our former faculty member. And we are only one of 2 schools that offer this. So Reading Area Community College is the other. She teaches over there. So I don't want to adopt this textbook for the students. It's expensive, and I would rather have a free or almost free option for them. So we did find a study guide for the PA board, and we're going to use that to help them prepare for the exam. But yeah, there's not a whole lot out there. There's national stuff, but it doesn't pertain to the PA auctioneer examiners exam that they have to pass. So,
Hey, Wendy.
Thank you. I wanted to just mention, Michelle made me think of this, that at the time that I started the process, Andrea Hartraft helped me do a search, and we found, shockingly, no human services related practicum manuals out there. When I was right before I was ready to, I was at the end of like creating the content, I happened to, just by accident, come across an OER that had just been published right in the pandemic time. So there was a chapter out of that OER that I loved. It was really saving me a lot of time. So the entire project that I did with my faculty was a create the 2,500, but at the very end, I was able to at least reference her segment of her OER to put right into mine. And that was really neat to see that it wasn't just mine out there. But I say that because even though today there's not much out there, make sure you don't do what I did and wait until the end to check again, because anybody at any time could put something out there that you might be able to use apart from. The other point I wanted, and this is directed probably toward Valerie or Karen, and I don't know if this was asked yet, I do recall at some point that there was a fee structure for updates that I believe what I recall is every 3 years you would get paid a few $100s to keep it updated. Is that still the case?
It is still the case, and I just emailed everyone whose OERs were produced spring, summer, and I didn't email the fall people who are up for eligible, because if somebody's eligible in the summer, they might want to do it in the summer. So I emailed them to reach out. So we are tracking that as well.
I'll look again, but the last time Andrea looked, there was a lot on auctioneering theory, which I didn't even know existed. So, and apparently some guy with a PhD wrote a whole OER textbook for PhD level auctioneering theory. We're not doing that, but maybe I'll keep looking again. It's really hard to find, and it's specific for PA. It is not national. It is, they have to pass the PA Board of Auctioneer exam. And the auctioneering law specifically is PA law. So specifically. So I think we're going to be creating from the bottom up. If I can get them to do it with me.
Other questions or comments? Okay, just as a reminder, and Karen, you can reiterate this, the deadline is the 21st. Is there any other information that you would like to stress?
No, the deadline is the 21st, and I can pull up that link if anyone needs it, although I don't have it ready. Hold on. Again, you don't have to know all the details of your project. You just need to know it's for this course. And I expect I will be adapting, or remixing. We have had people who said they were adopting and ended up remixing, or remixing and ended up creating, because again, there's that 20% line, but we can always adapt it later. We need an application so we know how much money approximately, and again, the timeline, so that we know how to track you. So
Thank you, Karen.
thanks, everyone.
Yes, thank you, Wendy and Matthew and Christine, and thank you all for attending. As you can see, there's no cookie cutter way to produce OER, so I would encourage you, I know Karen would as well, to really think about producing an OER. Thank you. Have a good day. Have a good weekend.